Good morning, students. Say your prayer. Thank you. நான் ஒரு நல்லாசிரியர். நான் உங்களுக்கு தாயாகவும் தந்தையாகவும் இருந்து முறையாக அன்போடு கல்வியை போதிப்பேன். நான் ஒரு நல்லாசிரியர். நான் உங்களுக்கு தாயாகவும் தந்தையாகவும் இருந்து முறையாக அன்போடு கல்வியை போதிப்பேன். நான் ஒரு நல்லாசிரியர். நான் உங்களுக்கு தாயாகவும் தந்தையாகவும் இருந்து முறையாக அன்போடு கல்வியை போதிப்பேன். Okay, students, take your social science book. Take page number 20. In today's class, we will discuss about the anti-colonial movements in Africa. Okay, wow. So the anti-colonial movement in Africa, so especially in South Africa. Okay, wow. So you heard about South Africa. Yeah, you are which is located in the southern part of Africa. Okay, wow. So we will discuss about the anti-colonial movement in Africa. So let us move into the lesson. So before entering into the class, just to recall what we have discussed in our previous class. So in our previous class, we have discussed what is decolonization. So decolonization means nothing but the transfer of power from colonial countries. So colonial power to indigenous national government. Yes, indigenous national power was called as decolonization. So transfer of power from the colonial powers to the local government, that is called as decolonization. So first the decolonization process in Indochina. So Indochina means it includes Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. We discussed about the decolonization process in Vietnam. So also we discussed what is white terror, then Ho Chi Minh. So who was Ho Chi Minh, what he did, we have discussed. Then the decolonization process in India. So what happened in India? So between the world wars. So first the introduction of diarchy in provinces through the Government of India Act 1919. Then the lack of measures to industrialize India. So that is, the British government didn't take any step to industrialize India, to start industries in India. Then third one, the effect of depression, the impact of depression on Indian agriculture. So we have discussed that also. Then finally about the Government of India Act 1935. Okay, ma? So as per this act, the Indian National Congress participated in the elections that held in 1937. But within 2 years, that is in the year 1939, the Indian National Congress withdrew. So that is resigned from the ministry because the British government, without consulting the Indian National Congress, involved India in the Second World War. So in order to oppose this, the Indian National Congress resigned from the ministry in the year 1939. Okay, so we have discussed this and all in detail in our previous class. So in today's class, we will discuss about the decolonization movement in Africa. Okay, so especially in South Africa. So colonization of Africa. So the African coastline had been explored in the 16th century and a few European settlements had came about. So Africa. So while coming to Asia, so Europeans have to cross Africa initially. So while crossing Africa, so they just traveled along the coastal region of Africa. So they didn't went to interior of Africa. But in the 16th century, few European settlements had came in the coastal line of Africa. So while traveling to Asia, Europeans had to travel across Africa. In the 16th century, they didn't explore that much in the interior part of Africa. So just the coastline was explored. So explored means to travel around a place in order to learn about it. So just they know the coastal area of Africa. So interior of Africa was unknown till the last quarter of 19th century. So till 1875, interior of Africa was not known. So there is no detail about interior of Africa till 1875. So European colonization began after about 1875. That is last quarter of 19th century. Then there was a dispute between European powers in sharing the Africa continent. So a conference was held in Berlin in Germany. So as per the Berlin Colonial Conference of 1884-85, so sphere of influence of various colonial powers was introduced. So the colonial powers, that is European powers, divided the European African continent among themselves, as per the sphere of confluence. But the war between the British and the Boers in Africa, in South Africa, however, was in defiance of this resolution. So defiance means, so they openly refused it. Yeah, so the war between the British and the Boers in South Africa was defiance of this resolution. So defiance means, so they refused to obey. So they refused it. So that is the British and the Boers refused the Berlin Colonial Conference of spheres of influence. Okay, so in 16th century, so African coastline was not known that much to the Europeans. So only few settlements was there. So interior of Africa was unknown till the last quarter of 19th century. Yeah, so European colonization began only after about 1875. So the Berlin Colonial Conference of 1884-85. So based on the spheres of influence of various colonial powers, so Africa was divided. Okay, so but the war between the British and the Boers in South Africa was defense. So was that is they won't. So they refused to obey the spheres of influence. Okay, so British and Boers. So the relationship between the British colonies and the two independent Boer colonies were unfriendly. So what were the two British colonies? So Natal and Cape Colony. So you can see at the edge, that is Cape Colony, and in the eastern side you can see Natal. So Natal and Cape Colony, so they were the British colonies. Then the Transvaal and Orange State. Yeah, so just to lie the west of Natal, so Orange Free State. Then above Orange Free State and Natal, it was Transvaal. So the Transvaal and Orange Free State were independent Boer state. Yeah, so who were Boers? Yeah, so Boers were nothing but the descendant of original Dutch settlers of South Africa. Okay, so they also known as Afrikaners. So they were called Boers. Okay, so Boers were nothing but the Dutch settlers. So Dutch, a country in Europe. So that Holland. Okay, so they began to settle in South of Africa from 16th century onwards. So their descendants were called as Boers. So the Boer state were Transvaal and Orange Free State. So the British colonies were Natal and Cape Colony. Then the Boer state, so the two independent Boer state was Transvaal and Orange Free State. So the relationship between them was not good. So they were unfriendly. So in the year 1886, so in the Transvaal, so gold was discovered. So in Transvaal, gold was discovered. So Transvaal, so was in Boer state. Yes, it was a Boer state. So gold was discovered in the year 1886. So large number of British miners settled around Johannesburg. So Johannesburg, it is also in Transvaal. Yeah. So the British miners began to settle in and around Johannesburg. So the Boers hated the people who were foreigners. Yeah. So Boers settled these British miners settled in and around Johannesburg. So they called the foreigners as Woodlanders. So they called these foreigners as Woodlanders. So they taxed them heavily. So the Boers hated the foreigners people, especially the British miners, and taxed them heavily. They also deny the political rights. So the Boers taxed them heavily apart from denying political rights. So denying means, so to refuse to admit or accept. So they refused the political rights to the British people. Okay, so here the question arises. So who was supreme, whether the British or the Boers? Okay, so here the question arises, that is, who was the superior? Who was supreme in South Africa, the Boers or the British? So fearing of attacks from the British, the Boers armed themselves and decided to attack. Okay, so fearing the attacks from British, so the Boers armed themselves. The Boers arranged themselves and decided to attack. Yeah, so in South Africa there were 4 states. Yeah, so 2 states. So Natal and Cape Colony, they were British colonies, and 2 independent states, Transvaal and Orange Free State. So they were Boer states. Yeah. So in Transvaal, gold was discovered in the year 1886. So a large number of British miners settled in and around Johannesburg, which was not liked by the Boer people. So which was not liked by the Boers. Yeah. So they called the foreigners. So they called the foreigners as the Woodlanders and taxed them heavily, and also they refused to give political rights to the British people. Yeah. Now the question arises. So in the 4 states, so Natal and Cape Colony, Transvaal and Orange Free State. So there are 4 states. So among these, who was supreme supreme. Yeah, so whose power was supreme? So there was a problem between Boers and the British. So in order to show who was supreme. Yeah. So fearing attack from the Boers, so fearing attack from the British, so the Boers armed themselves and decided to attack. The Boers Wars. So the Boers Wars lasted for 3 years. So it took place for 3 years. So 1899 to 1902. So already in 9th standard itself you have studied about the Boers Wars. Yeah, so we have discussed about the Boer War. Can you remember it? Yeah, if you can't means no problem. See, again we will discuss here. Okay. So initially in the year 1899 the Boers were successful. Initially the Boers were successful in the Boer War, but by the first half of 1900 the Boer army was defeated. Yeah, so initially the Boers were successful, but by the first half of 1900 the Boer army was defeated. So and the British occupied Pretoria. So Pretoria was a city just located near to Johannesburg. So Pretoria was occupied by the British. So the Boers took to guerrilla fighting. So guerrilla fighting means irregular fighting, irregular warfare. Okay. So Pretoria was occupied by the British. So the Boers took to guerrilla fighting. So the war continued for about 2 years. Okay. So in 1899 the war broke out between the Boers and the British. Initially the Boers were successful, but by the first half of 1900 the Boer army was defeated and Pretoria was occupied. So the Boers took to guerrilla fighting. So this continued, this extended the war for about 2 years. In retaliation, the British destroyed the farms and crops. So in retaliation means, so the action that a person takes against somebody who has harmed them in some way. Since the British army was so suffered by the guerrilla warfare of Boers, so they began to destroy the farms and the crops of the Boers. And also they set up internment camps for Boer women and children. So internment camp means to put somebody in prison during a war or for political reason, although they have not been charged with a crime. So that is to put somebody, that is to put the Boer women and children in prison during a war, although they have not been charged without a crime. Even though the Boer women and children didn't do any crime, so they were put in prison. They were put in prison because of war. So the shortage of food, medical and sanitary facilities caused the death of 26,000 people. So in the internment camp there is no good sanitary facilities. So sanitary facilities means so that environmental condition. So there is no proper facilities for women and children arranged. So because of the environment facilities, because of the sanitary facilities and the shortage of food and medical facilities, so there are a lot of death. So nearly 26,000 people were died. So at the end of 1902, so the British finally won the battle. So the British annexed the 2 Boer states. So what were the 2 Boer states annexed by the British? Transvaal and Orange Free State. So name the 2 British states already which was under the control of British. Natal and Cape Colony. So now the British annexed the 2 Boer states. So the Boers were however promised to self-government in due course, but the British promised the Boers they were given the self-government in due course. In 1907, full responsible government was given to the Transvaal and the Orange Free State. So that is in 1907, full responsible government was given to the Boer states, Transvaal and Orange Free States. So the 4 states formed into a union and the South Africa Act was passed by the British Parliament. So now the 4 states. So what are the 4 states? Natal, Cape Colony, Transvaal and Orange Free State. So both united to form a country. So as per the South Africa Act passed by the British Parliament in 1902. So provided for a union parliament at Cape Town. So provided for the parliament at Cape Town. So the Union of South Africa came into being in May 1910. So now the country South Africa, so when it was came into being means it was in the year 1910 in the month of May. So they have their parliament at Cape Town. So the edge, so Cape Town. So already you have learned in this previous class. That is the Cape of Good Hope. So the place where Vasco da Gama went. So that is before himself the Bartholomew Dias. So a famous explorer. So he came up to the Cape Town. So and returned back. So you have learned in your previous classes, no? Previous standard, no? Yeah, Cape Town. So there they established their parliament. So South African parliament was established there. So Cape Town. Okay, va? So how thus the South Africa, so a country was formed. So South Africa was formed by the union of the four states. Okay, so Transvaal, Orange Free State, Natal and Cape Colony. So these four states organized together and formed as South Africa by the British Parliament. So till now we have discussed about the colonization of Africa. So how the European powers colonized Africa. So as per the Berlin Conference. So which year the Berlin Colonial Conference took place? Yeah, 1884, 1885. Yeah. So but between whom the sphere of influence was not accepted? Yeah, the British and the Boers. Yeah. So who were Boers? Yeah, the descendant of original Dutch settlers. Okay. So when was Union of South Africa came into being? Yeah, May 1910. Yeah. So now the nationalist politics in South Africa. Okay. So after 1910, so there were two main political parties in South Africa. So one was called as Unionist Party, which mainly composed of British, and the other one was called as South Africa Party, which was also mainly consist of Afrikaners, that is Boers. Yeah. So Union Party consists of British, South Africa Party consists of Boers. Okay. So now political rivalry between British and Boers. Yeah. So even though British won the battle and occupied the Boer states, so the political controversy began now. Yeah. So there were two main political parties in South Africa. One was called as the Unionist Party, composed mainly of British, and the South Africa Party, composed mainly of Afrikaners or Boers. The first Prime Minister of South Africa was Botha. Yeah, so he was Botha. He belonged to South Africa Party. So South Africa Party mainly composed of Boers. Yeah, so South Africa Party. So the first Prime Minister of South Africa was Botha, who belongs to South Africa Party, but he ruled in cooperation with the support of British. Yeah, so Botha, the first Prime Minister of South Africa, ruled in cooperation with the British. So this was not liked by the militant section of the South Africa Party. Yeah, so the South Africa Party, which formed the first government in South Africa, elected Botha as the Prime Minister. Yeah, so Botha became the first Prime Minister. So he belonged to South Africa Party, but he ruled in cooperation with the British. But a militant section of the South Africa Party did not like this and formed a party called as National Party under Herzog. Yeah, so militant section of South Africa Party formed the National Party, formed the party called as National Party under Herzog. Okay, so he was Herzog. So now South Africa consists of three political parties. So one is Unionist Party, composed of British, then South Africa Party, composed of Afrikaners or Boers, then the National Party. So the National Party, which was which was the militant section of South African Party. Okay, so now there are three political parties in South Africa, that is in the year 1920. Yeah. So in the elections that held in 1920, the National Party gained 44 seats. Okay, so the National Party, so which was formed under Herzog, won 44 seats. Yeah. The South Africa Party, so now it was led by Smuts, secured 41 seats. Okay, so South Africa Party formed, that is the South Africa Party, now led by Smuts, secured 41 seats, while the National Party, so which was the militant section, gained 44 seats. Yeah. So at this juncture, the British dominated Unionist Party merged with the South Africa Party. Yeah, so now the British dominated Unionist Party. Already we have seen now. So that Unionist Party merged with the South African Party. This gave much a majority over the militant Afrikaner controlled National Party. Yeah. Even though the Afrikaner National Party gained 44 seats, so South Africa gained 41 seats. So South African Party was merged with the British dominated Unionist Party. Now the British dominated South African Party gain majority in parliament. Thus Smuts formed the government in 1920. Okay, so there are three political parties in Africa in 1920. So Unionist Party, South African Party, then National Party. So in the elections held in the year 1920, National Party gained 44 seats. Yeah, so they were majority. But South African Party gained 41 seats under their leader Smuts. But South African Party merged with the British dominated Unionist Party. So now the British dominated party gained majority. So Smuts controlled. So Smuts became the prime minister and controlled the country against the black. Yeah, so now the controversy of black and white began. Yeah, so the Afrikaners pursued that is followed a harsh and racist policy towards the blacks and the minority Indians. So Indians were also settled in Africa. Yeah. So the Afrikaners, that is the Boers and the British, followed a harsh and racist policy. So they show race. So that is the difference race, black and white race policy towards the blacks and the minority Indians. So in the year 1923, they passed an act so to confine the native residents to certain parts of towns. Yeah, so in 1923, they passed an act so in order to prevent the native residents in certain towns. Yeah, so in certain part of towns, so they were prevented. Yeah. Already an act of 1913 had segregated black and white farmers, which made it impossible for the blacks to acquire land in most part of the country. So already an act was passed in the year 1913, so which made impossible for the blacks to buy land in most part of the country. As per the act of 1913, so blacks were prohibited to buy land in most part of the country. So in the 1924 elections were won by National Party with the support of labor movement composed mainly of white miners. So the elections held in 1924, so the National Party won. Okay, so National Party won, but they won with the support of labor movement. Okay, so which consists of white miners. Yeah. So an act was passed in the year 1924, so which prevented blacks from striking work and from joining the trade unions. Yes, already in the year 1913, so the blacks were prohibited to acquire land, to buy land in many parts of the country. So in the year 1924, so National Party won with the support of labor movement composed mainly of white miners. So they passed an act in the year 1924 which prevented black workers from striking work and forming trade unions. Okay, so the Cape Union. So in the Cape province, the voting right to blacks was abolished. So in the Cape town, so the voting right was abolished. So the voting right was not given to black. Yeah. So the native blacks suffered a lot. Yeah. So only the black people were belonged to Africa. Yeah. So white people were the settlers only. Yeah. So they came after 17th century only. But the native blacks were denied of certain rights. So they were suffered in all spheres. So social, economic and political. Okay. So apartheid in South Africa. So apartheid means, have you heard about this word apartheid? What is meant by apartheid? A policy of racial discrimination. Yeah, so that is differentiating black and white. So that is called as apartheid. So apartheid, which means separateness, became the racial policy of Nationalist Party in 1947. Yeah, so the National Party took a policy called as apartheid. So from 1947. So from 1915 onwards, a series of laws came to be enforced. So from 1950 onwards, several laws were passed. Yeah, so the whole country was divided into separate areas for different races. Yeah, so the whole country, the whole South Africa was divided into separate areas. So one area for black and another area for white. Yeah, so you can see in this picture. So there are two ways. Yeah, so one is for non-Europeans only and another is for Europeans only. Yeah, so both are reaching at one place only. So both, if you go in this place, go to this through this star means you can reach a particular place only. So like this, there are several areas that were separated. Okay, so the marriage between the white and the non-white were forbidden, so were prohibited. Yeah. So nearly all schools were brought under government control so that education different from that of the whites could be implemented for Africans. Yeah. So all schools were brought under government control in order to give education that is different from whites could be implemented for Africans. So university education was also segregated. So apartheid is the policy based on the belief that the political equality of white and black in South Africa would mean black rule. Yes, apartheid is based on the belief that the political equality of white and black in South Africa would mean black rule. Okay, va? So apartheid in South Africa. So apartheid means, have you heard about this word apartheid? What is meant by apartheid? A policy of racial discrimination. Yeah, so that is differentiating black and white. So that is called as apartheid. So apartheid, which means separateness, became the racial policy of Nationalist Party in 1947. Yeah, so the National Party took a policy called as apartheid. So from 1947. So from 1915 onwards, a series of laws came to be enforced. So from 1950 onwards, several laws were passed. Yeah, so the whole country was divided into separate areas for different races. Yeah, so the whole country, the whole South Africa was divided into separate areas. So one area for black and another area for white. Yeah, so you can see in this picture. So there are two ways. Yeah, so one is for non-Europeans only and another is for Europeans only. Yeah, so both are reaching at one place only. So both, if you go in this place, go those to this through this star means you can reach a particular place only. So like this, there are several areas that were separated. Okay, so the marriage between the white and the non-white were forbidden, so were prohibited. Yeah. So nearly all schools were brought under government control so that education different from that of the whites could be implemented for Africans. Yeah. So all schools were brought under government control in order to give education that is different from whites could be implemented for Africans. So university education was also segregated. So apartheid is the policy based on the belief that the political equality of white and black in South Africa would mean black rule. Yes, apartheid is based on the belief that the political equality of white and black in South Africa would mean black rule. Okay, va? From 1947 onwards, so the National Party took a policy called as apartheid, so which separate the black and white people all over the country. Yeah. So ANC, African National Congress, fought the practice of racism. Yeah, so the African National Congress, which fought against the apartheid policy, was banned. So and its leader Nelson Mandela was put behind the bars. That is, he was put in prison. Yeah, so it's the leader of African National Congress. So Nelson Mandela was put behind bars. So mounting pressure at the global level helped to end the racist regime in South Africa. Yeah, so but the world countries so began to pressure the government of South Africa. So the South African government lifted the ban on ANC in the year 1990 and Mandela was freed after 27 years. So because of the global pressure, so the South African government removed the ban on African National Congress in the year 1990 and Mandela, so the leader of ANC, was freed after 27 years. So in the elections held subsequently, the Africans were allowed to vote. So already we saw in Cape Town. So in the year 1924, Act was passed which prohibited the blacks to avoid vote. So the blacks were prohibited in voting. Okay, so but in the elections held after the release of Nelson Mandela in the year 1990, blacks were allowed to vote. Okay, so Mandela became the first black president of South Africa. So in the elections that held after the release of Nelson Mandela, ANC won the election and Mandela became the first black president of South Africa. But even though apartheid was dismantled, the whites completely dominated the economic sphere. Even though the apartheid was dismantled in South Africa, the whites only dominated the economic field. Yeah, the black people was suffering in the economic field. Okay, students, so the colonial movement, so anti-colonial movement in Africa over. Okay, so what you can see in this picture, can you identify him? Who was he? So recently his name was in newspaper. So a few months ago, so his face was shown in international newspapers. Yeah, he was George Floyd. Yeah, so he was killed so by an American police officer. Okay, so he was while he was getting arrested by the police, so he was kneeled down. Yeah, so the police officer so have his leg on his neck, so on his neck, so that he can't breathe. Okay, so he asked to leave, but the police officer didn't leave. So he died. So he while he was getting arrested. So that caused a huge movement. So that caused a huge opposition in America. Okay, so that is the I show this picture in order to the racial discrimination. How much was worst in European countries and also in America. So till there is a racial discrimination was going between the black and white in many European countries, especially in America also. Okay, okay students. So note down your homework. So take page number 26. So fourth question. So point out the essence of Berlin Colonial Conference of 1884-85. Yeah. Come to page number 21 for answer. So first paragraph, second line. At the last, European colonization began after about 1875. The Berlin Colonial Conference of 1884-1885 resolved that Africa should be divided into spheres of influence of various colonial powers. The war between the British and the Boers in South Africa, however, was in defense of the solution. Yeah, so this is the answer for fourth question. So write it. Okay, then for textbook reading, take page number 22. So apartheid in South Africa. So that box, so along with that QR code now. So read that box fully. So for textbook reading. Okay, so finish your homework. Okay, students. So if you have any doubt, contact me. So thank you. Have a nice day.